national crime agency capabilities. Madam Deputy Speaker, on global security, the audit underlined the extent of Beijing's support for the Kremlin. The government has already tripled the number of Chinese entities sanctioned for equipping Russia's illegal war, and we will continue to confront that. The audit reiterated that our approach to China must stay rooted both in international law and deterrence. We will continue to confront China's dangerous and destabilizing activity in the South China Sea, which I saw for myself when I visited the Philippines. And we will continue to work with our regional partners to support freedom of navigation and call out China's abuses. We will double down on AUKUS. We will not challenge our long-standing position on Taiwan while sustaining unofficial but vibrant ties with Taiwan on trade, on education and innovation. We will also never shy away from shining a spotlight on human rights, notably the situations in Xinjiang and Tibet. While on Hong Kong, we will insist that China honours its commitments under the Sino-British Joint Declaration, including by repealing the national security law and releasing Jimmy Lai. Madam Deputy Speaker, the audit made clear that our approach will always be guided by the UK's long-term economic growth priorities. It provided ample evidence of the extent to which our economies are intertwined. China is our third biggest trading partner, our universities' second largest source of international students. China will continue to play a vital role in supporting the UK's secure growth. But over the past decade, we have not had the structures either to take the opportunities or protect us from the risks which those deep leaks demand. Businesses told us time and again that they have lacked senior political engagement, lacked adequate government guidance, and we have already begun to develop new structures. Regular economic and financial dialogues with my right honourable friend, the Chancellor, setting us on course to unlock $1 billion of economic value for the UK economy, and positioning the UK's world-leading financial sector to reflect China's importance to the global economy. Joint economic and trade commissions and joint commission meetings on science. We will also launch a new online hub bringing together detailed and specific business advice. And forthcoming trade strategy will set out how we will support British firms to enhance links with China's vast and growing consumer market, as well as assess new tools to keep goods made by forced labour anywhere in the world off Britain's high street. Madam Deputy Speaker, the audit recognised that China's global role does not fit into simple stereotypes. China is the world's biggest emitter, but also the biggest producer of renewables. It offers $80 billion towards development annually, and China is the UK's second largest research collaborator. 11% of British research output included Chinese authors. So the audit was clear. The UK must develop new dialogues with China on issues like climate, development, global health and science, as well as on trade. And in doing so, we're driving our long-term interests in creating secure opportunities for UK PLC. Madam Deputy Speaker, we cannot deal with China's complexity unless we improve our capability to understand it for our national security and for secure trade and growth. The audit showed that under the last government, there was a profound lack of confidence in how to deal with China, and a profound lack of knowledge regarding China's culture, its history, and most importantly, its language. Madam Deputy Speaker, over the past year, I have found that far few Mandarins speak Mandarin. We are already taking action to address this, introducing a new China fast stream in the FCDO, creating an FCDO Global China Network, training over 1,000 civil servants on China policy in the past year. Enhancing these capabilities still further will be a core focus for the £209 million of FCDO Transformation Fund, announced in the National Security Strategy by my honourable friend a short time ago. The new strategy, which proceeds from this audit, will ensure that the government examines the full spectrum of interests in its decision-making processes and delivers the consistent approach which was so sorely lacking. Madam Deputy Speaker, anyone expecting a simple prescription on China is not living in the real world. The audit has painted a complex picture, but it has provided us with a clear way forward. The UK's approach to China will be founded on progressive realism, taking the world as it is, not as we would wish it to be. Like our closest allies, we will cooperate where we can, and we will challenge where we must. Never compromising on our national security, recognising the complexity of the world as it is, engaging confidently, carefully and pragmatically, delivering secure growth. These are the hallmarks of grown-up government, acting in the long-term national interest. I commend this statement to the House.
Shadow Foreign Secretary Dame Priti Patel.
Mr. Speaker, I'm grateful to the Foreign Secretary for advance sight of a statement, and I look forward to reading the audit and also receiving the detailed briefings that clearly are not able to be put in the public domain. Let's be clear, Madam Deputy Speaker. China thinks its way is the best way and the only way. Its leaders are on a quest, an international quest for global governance and for their frightening authoritarian model to supersede ours. Ours is one of democracy, openness and standing up for freedom and values. Madam Deputy Speaker, China has been ramping up its military with alarming conviction, including conventional, nuclear and space capabilities. It is a critical enabler of Russia's illegal invasion of Ukraine. And we saw President Xi standing side by side with Putin in Moscow just weeks ago. So be in no doubt, China and Russia are collaborating across all domains to underestimate our very democratic freedoms and the West. Beijing tramples on the Sino-British Declaration in Hong Kong, threatens BNOs on British soil and has imprisoned Jimmy Lai, a British national, through this awful politically motivated trial. Beijing's unjustified aggression in the South China Sea is dangerous, and it unacceptably intimidates and challenges the sovereignty of its neighbours in the Indo-Pacific. It is consistently and constantly threatening the peace-seeking democracy of Taiwan while committing the most appalling human rights abuses in Xinjiang. And it applies hybrid and grey zone techniques against Britain, including malign cyber activity directed at our democratic institutions and sanctioning our own very members of Parliament, all while exploiting vulnerable countries through its Belt and Road Initiative. China also flagrantly brushes aside economic rules, steals intellectual property, and has developed sophisticated models to acquire strategic assets around the world. Despite all of this, Madam Deputy Speaker, it has taken the government a year to produce this audit, which seemingly fails to set out any kind of serious strategic framework. And I think it's fair to say we know why. Because the government, and in fact the Foreign Secretary has touched on this, has gone cap in hand to China to bail out its terrible handling of the British economy. It is setting up its closer ties, economic ties with China, while knowing very well that British businesses here are struggling, not just when it comes to competing against China, but actually struggling to absorb the weight of Labour's own regulatory costs in this country. So, can I ask the Foreign Secretary, and so far we've not seen it in this statement, whether or not he can name a single area where a measurable, tangible progress has been made in advancing critical British interests with China, whether it's on national security, economic practices, on climate, or on human rights. He did fail to mention the fact that members of this House have been sanctioned by China. And Madam Deputy Speaker, we have seen signs of naivety from the government consistently, if I may say so. Within a day of the Prime Minister meeting with President Xi, within one day of the Prime Minister meeting President Xi, he effectively held this as an opportunity to bring about a strong and consistent relationship, whereas surprises would be avoided. And within the next few days, 45 pro-democracy campaigners were jailed in Hong Kong, following a very harsh application of the draconian national security law. That's completely unacceptable. What is the Foreign Secretary's actual strategy to deter China from systematically extinguishing freedoms from Hong Kong? And will he commit to using the full weight of the government machine to do more to protect BNOs and Hong Kongers suffering what is an outrageous transnational repression in the UK, rather than, if I may say so, just issuing guidance and training? The government has constantly and suspiciously backed the application for this new China super embassy in London. Why is the Foreign Secretary and the government not showing the same backbone that the Irish counterparts and Australian counterparts have shown when they saw fit to block embassy planning applications from Russia that they deemed too risky for national security? Does the government have a practical strategy to deter Chinese efforts to capture Taiwan by military means or by stealth, or opposing the human rights abuses in Xinjiang? What is the Foreign Secretary's end goal, and what are the means of getting there? What would the Foreign Secretary do to find new critical mineral supply chains to reduce reliance on Chinese trade? And with that, Madam Deputy Speaker, what will the government do now to move Jimmy Lai's case onto an urgent footing, away from this complex consular case handling that it seems to have in the Foreign Office? Madam Deputy Speaker, the government also needs to urgently sort out some of the grave contradictions that have been mentioned in this statement, if I just may highlight a few. We've already seen in the Foreign Secretary's statement today, he speaks about the China audit underlining the extent of Beijing's support of the Kremlin. We don't question that and doubt that, but some action is needed. The statement also says that they're reiterating the approach that China must stay rooted both in international law and deterrence. How is that helping Jimmy Lai at this particular moment? And finally, Madam Deputy Speaker, I do just want to say that we will always support the security and the defence of our country, so the government must do much more when it comes up to keeping Britain safe from China.
Well, Madam Deputy Speaker, I have to say, I know that the Right Honourable Lady can be pretty brazen, but a lecture from her about China policy should make even her blush. Her party oversaw more than a decade of division, inconsistency and complacency towards China. There was no strategy, there was no plan, and there was no sense of a national interest. The Intelligence and Security Committee, chaired by the Right Honourable Member for New Forest East, from her own party, said that the actions on China had left Britain severely handicapped in managing our future security. And the truth was that she was at the centre of it. Where was she during the ill-judged Cameron Osborne golden age? She was the Minister for the Treasury. Where was she during the humiliating Huawei U-turn? She was Home Secretary at that point. Under the Tories, they had their head in the sand. Under them, Britain's defences were weakened and our armed services hollowed out. It's a Labour government that's investing £600 million in our intelligence services to deal with those threats. It's a Labour government that's investing £290 million extra a year in our diplomatic capabilities in this area. It's a Labour government delivering the biggest increase in defence spending since the Cold War, and it's a Labour government making Britain secure at home and strong abroad. And can I just refer the Honourable Lady to page 28 of the Strategic Defence Review, which she clearly hadn't bothered to read, that makes clear that, of course, we understand that China is a sophisticated and persistent threat. She talks about the embassy. She should know, as Home Secretary, that it is a quasi-judicial decision that's been properly made by the Secretary at the Department for Communities and Local Government. She talks about Jimmy Lai. I met with Sebastian Lai last week. We've been raising this issue on every single occasion. A trial is ongoing. Let us see how it will complete. She raises transnational aggression. We're the ones updating our state threats legislation because they left the gaps and did nothing while they were in power. She raises the situation in Russia and the Chinese supplying Russia with use. Who has done the sanctions? 5 rounds of sanctions under me as Foreign Secretary. What did they do? So really, I'm not going to take any lectures about this subject from this government who know they were found wanting on the question of threats from the Chinese.
Chair of the Select Committee, Dame Emily Thornberry.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. Our relationship with China is most definitely a difficult one. On the one hand, it's our third biggest trading partner, but on the other hand, the National Security Strategy on page 35 says that there's an increase in espionage, they're undermining our economic security, and they're interfering in our democracy, and that has increased over recent years. And the Foreign Office needs to hold the ring. So the China Audit it needs to be a wide-ranging and is a really important piece of work. We were looking forward to seeing it published and looking forward to the Foreign Secretary publishing it and coming to talk to us, and he did say that he would. But instead of that, we are looking through a glass darkly, and we don't know, we won't be able to see it. So we want to be able to do our job properly, we want to be able to scrutinise this really important piece of work, so can I suggest that instead that the Foreign Secretary makes available a reading room for Foreign Affairs Committee members and staff at the FCDO before his 8th of July appearance so that we can study it properly and hold them to account.
Well, I'm very grateful to the Right Honourable Lady for the issue that she's taken in the China audit, and I did say that I would update the committee, and I'm looking forward to appearing before the committee and taking questions on this subject. Can I say to her that in completing this audit, it has been important to remain consistent with our Five Eyes partners, and she will recognise why much of the audit has led to a high level of classification. And she will note when she looks across the G7 and other Five Eyes partners, she will recognise that actually many of them have handled their approach to China in the way that I have set out in doing what I have said. But I would refer her to the Strategic Defence Review and its contents on China. I would refer her to the National Security Strategy that has just been published and its references to China. And I would also refer her to the UK's industrial strategy and its references to China alongside the statement that I've just made.
Liberal Democrat spokesperson Callum Miller.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I also thank the Foreign Secretary for the advance sight of his statement. For years, UK governments have failed to take seriously the challenge posed by China. The Conservatives failed to deliver even the semblance of a coherent approach to dealing with Beijing. And today, after months of waiting for this audit, the government's failure to publish a standalone document is immensely disappointing. So can the Foreign Secretary set out how members of this House, including those on the Intelligence and Security Committee and the front benches with responsibility for foreign affairs, defence and security, can be briefed on the more sensitive elements of this audit? On these benches, Madam Deputy Speaker, we recognise China for what it is, a threat to our values and interests. The Foreign Secretary is right that our approach must confront the facts as they are. These facts include China's hostility to the UK's allies and support for our adversaries, its abuse of human rights in Xinjiang and Hong Kong, the theft of intellectual property, and its efforts at transnational repression. And so instead of trying to establish warm relations with President Xi, the government should commit to clear red lines on what it will not accept. For example, we have yet to receive a satisfactory explanation for why the Honourable Member for Bath was denied entry to Hong Kong while on a private visit to see her family. So will the Foreign Secretary confirm what steps he will take if Beijing refuses to give an assurance that MPs will not be blocked from visiting Hong Kong or China? We now hear reports that the Deputy Prime Minister is preparing to wave through Beijing's application for a proposed mega embassy in the heart of London. This is not a technical planning matter to be cloaked in the veil of quasi-judicial powers. It is a matter of national security. Opposition has been expressed by the United States and by pro-democracy Chinese and Hong Kong activists living in the UK who already face CCP-sponsored bounties. Has the Foreign Secretary met with these activists? And will the Foreign Secretary now formally request that the mega embassy application be blocked?
Well, I'm grateful for the Honourable Gentleman's statement. And as I have said, this was a comprehensive audit of our relations with China. and precisely because of some of the reasons that he and honourable members have raised consistently, there are important classified sections of that audit that quite must properly remain classified. But he does raise the Intelligence Committee, and he will recognise that the mechanisms are in place for that committee to understand some of the detail as he would expect and scrutinise as he would expect in the usual way. He mentions the experience of the Honourable Lady for Bath, and can I make clear that when I met with the Chinese international minister and the member of the Communist Party just recently, Mr. Li Jingchao, I did raise with him that case and our huge concerns and its implications for the free travel of British citizens and democratically elected members of Parliament, not just in this country, but across the world. He raises the embassy and questions of security. That was precisely why I and the Home Secretary, advised by our security agencies, wrote on the issue of the embassy, raising concerns that would need to be addressed if it was to move forward. And yes, of course, I've met with activists campaigning, particularly on the issue of transnational repression, and so has the Minister who deals with this issue and the Indo-Pacific.
Matt Doodle.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. As chair of both the APPG on Uyghurs and on Hong Kongers, I've lost count of the number of responses from ministers I've had which referred to today's audit. So you'll forgive me if I take today as the start of a conversation rather than the last word on many of these matters. He used again today his 3 C's mantra of competing with China, cooperating with them and challenge them where needed. I wonder if he understands that many of the Hong Kongers, the Uyghurs and others who are fighting for freedom from or within the PRC sometimes worry that the order of that is deliberate and that the challenge part is a lower priority. I wonder what reassurance he can give to those groups that commercial interests won't trump the responsibility to protect the freedoms and security, particularly of British Hong Kongers. And given the threats identified in the audit, but also in the national security challenge, can he confirm that those will be fed into the decision-making on whether to allow the embassy?
Well, I'm grateful to my honourable friend and for his championing on the APG and pressing these issues. And can I say, I said in my statement that we will cooperate where we can, but we will challenge where we must. And of course, I have consistently raised the situation in meetings with counterparts for the Uyghur Muslims. I've encouraged them to implement the recommendations of the Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights in relation to Xinjiang. Genocide, of course, is a matter for the international courts, but it is something that I and, of course, across our allies in the G7 take very, very seriously indeed. And we will press this issue with the government of China on every single occasion.
Sir Ian Duncan-Smith.
Madam Deputy Speaker, can I first of all, before we go to the political knockabout, it doesn't matter who's in government, I've been in opposition on this issue, okay, so let's settle that one before we get... Can I just say to him, I'll give him a quick audit now of exactly what should have been. China threatens Taiwan, it's invaded the South China Seas, it's having massive disputes with the Philippines, it's genocide, slave labour, organ harvesting, transnational repression, attacks Hong Kong's dissidents here, Hong Kong dissidents under threat constantly, cyber attacks on the UK, supports Myanmar in their repression, the military regime, supports Russia's invasion of Ukraine, it also supports North Korea and Iran, and has trashed the Sino-British Treaty on Hong Kong, it has arrested Jimmy Lai, it has sanctions on UK MPs, and it thieves all the IPs on private companies. What a record to balance what against some potential trade. I asked the right honourable gentleman, which has already in a way been asked, but it's worth repeating, in the course of this embassy decision, that it was said quite clearly in the media that China would not apply again after the refusal of Tower Hamlets unless they received assurances from the UK government. Can he now tell me that they have not received any assurances, or have they received private assurances from the government that they will get what they want and get this embassy?
Well, let me just express respect for the Right Honourable Gentleman's expertise in relation to the China threat, and also that he is subject to sanctions that I have consistently raised with China, noting that recently it lifted sanctions against members of the European Parliament, and I pressed them recently to do the same. And let me assure him, there are no grubby deals on any issues, and certainly not in relation to the embassy. And I reject any suggestion of anything other. He describes the context for China. I refer him to page 28, which summarises, better than he did, in fact, the challenge. It's a sophisticated and persistent challenge. China is increasingly leveraged its economic, technological, military capabilities, seeking to establish dominance in the Indo-Pacific, erode US influence and put pressure on the rules-based international order. We agree.
Matt Weston.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I thank my right honourable friend for his statement. I'll be the first to recognise with him the need for pragmatism on this issue. My right honourable friend speaks of our closest allies, and I heard in Washington a couple of weeks ago just about their concerns over the super embassy, of course, here in London, where they have real concerns, as I say, but also the fact that they are banning electric vehicles for their autonomous and connected nature, which is an extraordinary thing to consider, but that is what they are doing. So whilst I recognise there is an economic need, obviously there is political pressure as well. Can I just ask that for the members of the committee that I chair in National Security Strategy, that we should also have access to those confidential documents so we can be clear-eyed about what we face?
Well, again, I'm grateful for the work that my honourable friend does in this area, but I must maintain that it has not been the case under any government that for other than those on the Intelligence Committee who are able to have access to high classification documents, and those who are Privy Councillors who are able to have access to conversations with the government and officials that they pledge to keep secret. The government cannot abandon those principles that have led us well for many years under consistent governments.
Edward Morella.
Madam Deputy Speaker, on page 35 of the National Security Strategy it says instances of China's espionage, interference in our democracy and undermining of our economic security have increased in recent years. Just 3 pages later, it claims the importance of creating the basis for a reciprocal and balanced economic relationship with China. I wonder if the Foreign Secretary recognises the inherent conflict between this government's desire for closer economic relations and the Chinese government's desire to undermine our economy.
Well, the paradox is important, but let me be clear that £600 million worth of new investment in our intelligence services is an important development. Investment in our capabilities, including new powers and capabilities for the National Cyber Centre, is an important development. But of course, as our third biggest trading partner, being able to unlock £1 billion worth of trade must also be central to our undertaking at this time.
Gurinder Singh Yosam.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I welcome this statement, particularly as it becomes clearer and clearer in terms of how the Conservatives have so badly mismanaged not just the policy towards China, but also our relationship with China over successive years. Whilst there are economic opportunities with China, there are also threats, and we're hearing about some of those. But we also just heard in the National Security Strategy statement earlier about the importance of partnerships and alliances, including with key allies in the Indo-Pacific. But does the Foreign Secretary agree that Boris Johnson's 2019 embracing of China's Belt and Road Initiative was a serious diversion from many of our democratic allies, many of whom saw the Belt and Road Initiative as a threat?
Well, I'm very grateful to the Honourable Gentleman. Prime Minister Johnson's record on China is shocking. It led to the grave embarrassment of having to do a U-turn on Huawei, who at that stage would have been able to get into the most delicate of our own telecommunications infrastructure. It's because of that we undertook to do a full audit in opposition. That audit, of course, is constantly ongoing, but I hope he will see it reflected in the industrial strategy, in the national security strategy, and, of course, in the SDR that was published recently.
Tom Tugendhat.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. And may I say I enjoyed the buzzword bingo with which the Right Honourable Member presented his statement. And may I just remind him that the rebellion on Huawei was actually led by this side of the House, not by his. May I also just question one of the meetings he referred to with, may I say, a little more pride than I would have done, as he referred to meeting Liu Jinchao, who is personally responsible for Operation Fox Hunt and Skynet, which is, of course, the transnational repression, the kidnapping of Chinese citizens and the repatriating them by force to mainland China. He didn't seem to be quite as ashamed of that as I would have been. Yeah. May I also ask him why he has still not made clear that the first scheme that we left intact, left ready to go, will not yet be introduced for the whole of the Chinese state. It should be, that's what it was designed for, and for all the words that we've heard, there is not a single practical outcome. It's all still waffle.
I've got to say to the Honourable Gentleman, and I recognise that there, and it's right to put that on record, there are members in their seat on the opposition benches, and he is amongst them, who raise significant issues over the past decade or so about the approach to China. But with all seriousness, that was why, in opposition, we said that we would do a full audit. He will recognise that and welcome, I suspect, the extra investment in the intelligence